Hello, I'm Becky DeGennaro. I'm with Crown Title, as most of you know, and I'm here to talk about the title process and what happens once you get the contract and you go to closing. There's a lot of wheels turning behind the scenes once you get that contract and turn it into us. Um, the most important thing, of course, on your side is to get the contract to us in time with the escrow deposit. That's the most important thing. We can't do anything until we get those two items, and then we can start doing our searches. Now, what does title do? We search any encumbrances, liens, mortgages, um, notice of commencements, anything like that that's going to show up on the backside of the title on the current owner or on any of the prior owners that are on the title. We also look for wild deeds or inaccurate deeds. A wild deed is one that was filed incorrectly, making it a voided deed, something that should not have transferred property from one owner to another. We correct those issues before the new owner takes title. We also do municipal lien searches. Municipal lien searches, we search for open permits. We search for water, gas, anything that a municipality could have a lien on the property for. Now, when we do those things, when we do the municipal lien searches, if there's a balance at the time when we do the search, saying maybe the owner just owes their current bill, their current bill to the water department, it's going to show up on the municipal lien search, and we must put it on the settlement statement. Your seller can show up with a receipt showing that that has been paid and it will be removed at that time, but we have to show it on the settlement statement at the time of closing. It's usually very insignificant, but it tends to get sellers upset. So if you want to prevent that, give them a heads up. That it's just many times it comes back in the middle of a billing cycle, and that's why it shows up. The other things that we look for are open permits. Open permits, especially in Pasco County, are a growing problem, especially since the boom and the fall. When we had the big boom, building boom in the early 2000s, there were a lot of contractors and a lot of subcontractors doing a lot of building in the state of Florida, particularly Pasco County, because they were moving north. Then we had the fall. So when we had the great fall in 2007, a lot of those contractors left open permits. They never closed out their permits. They didn't pay their subcontractors. So we're finding a lot of notice of commencements that were never closed out. We're finding a lot of open permits that were never closed out. And what does that mean? Title does not cover permits. It does not cover that. But we search them because Pasco County or any county is still going to say that there is a fee due to close the permit. The fee and the inspection has to be done to close the permit. That's the reason we inform you of that, so that you can inform your sellers and you can inform your buyers. As far as anything happening because of that lien, title insurance doesn't cover it, but it is something that needs to be addressed between the parties. The next thing after we do our municipal lien search, after we get our search back, when our search comes back, that's when title is in full swing. We might find things that the property is in a trust, or the property might be an LLC, or it could be in probate. It could be a life estate, and the remainder on the deed is the one selling it. These are all things that we find when we do the title search. And for every issue, there's something that's a little bit different. If your client is an LLC, we're going to have the articles of incorporation. We're going to have the operating agreement. That's standard. If it's a trust, we need to have a copy of the trust showing that your seller is the current trustee or your buyer is the current trustee of that trust. They're going to sign some affidavits at closing stating that there's been no changes, little minor paperwork, but it's stuff that we have to do, and we got to know that in advance as quickly as possible so that we could start gathering the documents that we need at the closing table.
So when you have a trustee, do they normally have like a trustee form? Or is it something specific that you send over that we've got to get done by the attorney that's handling the trust or whatever?
No, when it's in a trust, they're going to have a copy of that trust.
Okay.
The trust will name who the current trustee is and who the successor trustees will be. At the, if one of them is not the trustee and given it up by death or disability or just doesn't want to deal with it anymore, it'll go to a successor trustee. And that's all named in the trust. So all of that will come back. We'll look at all of those things. And if for some reason it wasn't filed correctly, then we have to get with the trustee and say, hey, you didn't file your paperwork. These are the things that we need to happen before we can proceed with the sale. So those are all really important things that a lot of people don't realize, or they might put them off on getting them to us late in the game. When you have a 30-day closing, there are lots of things that have to be done. So I know that realtors are extremely busy when they go under contract doing their things, but you've got to make sure that your buyers and sellers participate in helping you to help them by providing these documents early on in the game so that if there are any problems that come up, we can address them early. The next thing that's going to happen is once we get those items cleared, we get the municipal lien cleared. The next thing that usually typically happens is your lender sends over a request for title docs. Now, when they request title docs, they're basically asking us for different documentation. They're asking us for our E&O insurance. They're asking us for the buyer's, for the current deed that's on the property. They're asking us for just little things that we provide to them, and they're asking us for our fees. Now, this is where this is where it's important to you guys. Those fees include commissions. Even though we know that the seller pays those commissions, we've got to have your total commission. Your CDA between you and your broker, that can come later in the game. But we need to see your broker fees and your full commission for both sides because we've got to disclose that on the closing disclosure for the seller. Okay, so those are really important. Get those to us really early on in the game, and we can stop a lot of procrastination. A lot of delays happen when we don't have information like this early on in the game. When you turn in your contract, please make sure that we've got buyer, seller, and both realtors and your lenders contacts. We need their contact names. We need their contact phone numbers. We need their contact emails. Get as much information from your seller and your buyer as possible.
Say that again, the name?
Name, email, phone number, and we've got to have as much information as possible. If you know they're married, let us know that they're married. If you know their marital status, if you know that they're living in the property, let me know that so that I know what we're dealing. Are we dealing with a second home? Are we dealing with an empty home? Or we got to know these things because we also have to prepare for the closing. If your seller is living in the home, they've got to go somewhere. So we've got to make sure that we know what to prioritize. Where are they living? How are we going to make this happen? That's going to be the least stressful on everyone because people are moving around, buyers and the sellers. If it's an empty house, it's a little bit more lax, and that's not as much pressure as on the seller and the buyer and moving day and closing day. But if you can let us know as much information as possible, it helps a lot. When the closing disclosure goes out, I did want to talk about the TRID. Okay. The TRID it stands for the TILA RESPA Integrated Disclosure. TILA is what we used to use before they came out with the TRID rule. It was the Truth in Lending Act, usually provided by the lender at the closing table. The RESPA is Real Estate Settlement Disclosure Act. They've taken these, and that's where the final figures came up, and we were letting the buyers know what they needed to bring to closing. They've taken the Truth in Lending and the RESPA, and they combined it into one form now, which is called the closing disclosure. And the TRID rule applies. They have to be disclosed 3 days before closing, 3 business days before closing. So if you're closing on a Monday, then your buyer has to be disclosed. Their fees have to be disclosed by Thursday the prior week. You can't, and no changes can be done on that disclosure between Thursday and Monday. So if you're planning on Monday closing, it's Thursday the prior week. It's Tuesday, it's Friday the prior week, and so on. They do count Saturday as a business day. Sunday is not counted. So just remember, and also a lot of people walk around thinking they have to be disclosed 72 hours prior to closing. That's not true. It's not based on hours. It's based on business days. Okay. So why is that important for you guys to know? Well, because if you really needed to close on the 15th, then you need to make sure that all of your stuff, all of your prices, everything that, your commissions, all of that is disclosed, is given to us so that we can get it to the lender, and the lender can disclose the buyer prior to the closing. It's very important, because if they're not disclosed, they're not closing. And they make no exceptions on that. And some lenders don't even count Saturday. Most do. They're supposed to count Saturday, but some lenders don't count Saturday as a business day. So what do we do when we go? We've got all of this. We've cleared all of our requirements. We've got all of our figures in. Usually about the time that your appraisal comes in is when the lender's going to tell us if they need a survey. Now, we just went over this in another class last week about surveys. Lenders don't require surveys. What lenders require is a Florida Form 9. It's an endorsement that goes on the lender's policy. So in order to issue the endorsement that the lender requires, we have to have a survey in order to issue the Florida Form 9 endorsement. So that's where your survey comes in. Crown Title will accept old surveys from the prior seller if they're 3 to 5 years old, but not any later than that. A lot of things can happen on a property 3 to 5 years old. And while we're talking about the sellers and surveys, I did want to bring up something. I got a phone call last week from a realtor who stated that their neighbor was selling their home, and they had a fence that was encroaching on their property, and they wanted to know what to do. What do we do about this? I don't want them to sell their house when their fence is on our property. So before we get all crazy about that, let's talk about what title policies cover. Title policies do cover what she just described. The problem is we've got to ask a few questions. Number one, when were you made aware of this? Well, we didn't know it until our neighbor went to sell their house, and then they had a survey. And after the survey pins were put down, we realized that their fence was on our property. And I said, okay, who put the fence up? Oh, it wasn't them. It was the people who lived here before them. And I said, okay. So what the realtor was describing is she thought that maybe she had to contact the buyers or an attorney or the realtors and get this fence moved or get some kind of to get the problem solved somewhat. But all she really had to do was pull out her own title policy for her home. Call the company who did the closing and tell them, I have a fence that's encroaching on my property. That's what title policy is. They're an insurance policy. It's an insurance policy that protects your right and interest to your property.
So you're saying the seller just needed to let the
her own title. The seller, no, this was a neighbor. Her neighbor was selling the house.
Right.
The one who called me was the neighbor of the person selling their home. And the one who called me said that that neighbor had built a fence on her property, or the prior neighbors had built a fence on her property.
So the one who was not selling needed to call her title
Yes,
and say, I know about this encroachment,
yes,
and that's all that needed to be done.
That's all you need to do.
Disclose it.
that's it.
Okay.
They call their own policy, their own title company on their policy. They call that title company. And I told her, well, take some pictures of it and send it to your title agency or your title company who did the closing. And that's a claim. Now, how does that, and her biggest fear was, well, what am I supposed to do this by tomorrow? They're closing by tomorrow. What do I do? Doesn't matter what they're doing. You call your title policy, your title carrier, your underwriter, you call them and they take it from there.
So wasn't she aware of that before though?
She was aware that the prior owner had put up a fence, but she wasn't aware that they had encroached on her property. A fencing company did it. So she was assuming that everything was great. So now there's a discrepancy. And it's that discrepancy that she needs to call her own title carrier.
So I guess my question would be, if they said the previous owner to the neighbor's house had done it, when the current owner bought it, shouldn't they have had a new survey that found it at that point?
They could, yes. The new survey should have found it, but it didn't. So what does that tell you? They probably used the prior seller's survey. That they probably used it and not shown that fence. So, or they could have saw the fence and made the exception. They could have seen it on the survey. Hey, yeah, there's an encroachment here. We're going to make an exception and we're not going to cover any claims regarding that fence, is what the neighbor who's selling, their policy probably said that. Yeah, we see that encroachment. We're not going to cover any claims. We're going to make an exception on that fence line.
On that 2 feet or whatever.
Yes, whatever the fence, wherever it's encroaching. So that's how it works. So then what would happen? That means that the people who bought the house, they have the exception on that fence line. If a claim came on that, their policy's not going to cover them. So what will it do? It'll go back to the prior policy, which would have been the sellers before them who put the fence up. It would go back to that prior policy. So the two insurance companies will battle it out. What the end outcome is what they agreed to. They either going to move the fence or compensate or whatever it is they agree to. That's how that's handled. But the two insurers battle it out, and it doesn't cost the homeowner, the lady who called me, it won't cost her any money. Title policy is very important, and it's just for situations like that. That's just a fence. A fence is a movable thing. Just think if someone did an extension or a build out on their home or a pool when they encroached on just think about that. So policies are very important. Surveys, and that's why surveys are very important. And that's why we don't like to go back any further than 3 to 5 years with an affidavit from the party that says there's been no changes to the property since the survey had been done. So that's the reason that we ask for them, and that's the reason that surveys are important. And that's why the lender wants the Florida Form 9. It covers such things. It covers their interest. They've got an interest too. They've got their lender policy.
Just as an example, let's say I wanted to fence in my yard and I don't have a survey that's recent. So would I have to hire a survey company to do it to be able to have the fence put in?
Yes,
Okay.
Typically, if you
And then could I use that survey?
They can use your survey as long as you've not made any changes, and as long as when they come out, they're gonna do their own. The fencing company's gonna do their own, and they're gonna be comparing it to your survey.
Okay.
That's when they'll say, hey, we got a couple of feet difference in your survey and what we're showing. We're gonna have to do a new survey, or they're gonna say, yeah, it looks good to us. We're gonna go ahead and look at that. So where they in the situation that I'm talking about, who made the mistake is unclear. Maybe the original survey was wrong. Maybe the fencing company was wrong. Maybe the new survey that just got done, maybe it was wrong. But you always have to have the survey in order to make sure that your buyers and your sellers are aware of their property lines. And that's the reason for it, is for the policy coverage. Okay. So anyway, with that said, we'll go on to talking about the survey. About the time that the appraisal has come back from your new lender is about the time that we're going to order the survey. The survey company that we use takes about 3 to 5 days, sometimes can go 7 to 8, depending on weather conditions. But they're pretty quick, and they're very, very stable. I mean, we pretty much know what their charges are going to be for typical lot and blocks. So we don't always have a lot of issues that come up from the surveys, from the time frame. So don't get panicked if it's 12 days before closing and we don't have the survey yet. Not a time to panic. Okay, so we'll let you know when to panic. Don't, we get a lot of phone calls every day, people upset of panicking about timeframes. We're perfectly aware of them. Please rely on us to tell you when it's going to be time to panic, or when things aren't going so well.
Just out of curiosity, what does an average survey cost?
An average survey with the company that we use on a typical lot and block, they charge $300. If it's a little bit more, like it goes bigger than a lot and block, then the charges change. It can go to $375, $400 on larger lots. And then if an elevation certificate is required for the property, they'll provide that to us for $150. So,
And this is something the buyer typically pays as part of their closing costs, or they pay upfront?
The buyer does not pay it up front with our survey company. Not all survey companies act like that. A lot of survey companies want to be paid up front. We have an understanding with our survey people that we use that they will let it go on to the closing costs. So it's wrapped in, they pay for it at the table with their regular closing costs. We will ask them to sign an okay, that they agree to pay for the survey should something fall through. If something happens with the lending, the deal goes through, they have to understand they're going to pay for the survey, because if they don't pay for it, we pay for it. It's an agreement that's made between us and the surveyor, and we've gotten stuck a couple of times. Not too often. Usually they work with us pretty good, but a couple of times we've gotten stuck on larger properties and things. So just as long as they sign a statement saying that they understand that the cost of the survey, they'll be billed for it or invoiced for it, if the deal falls through for any reason.
Now, in that case, would you just withhold it out of their escrow?
If they want us to. We don't do it automatically. We've got to have them tell us to do that. We can't do that automatically. So anyway, we get all of these things done, and I think the thing that takes the longest are the estoppels, the HOA estoppels. When you're doing your contracts, please get information on your HOAs. It's the best time to ask the sellers. They're prepared to answer that question when you're signing the contract. They're going to know who the contact names and numbers are for their HOAs, and they're going to know the names of the HOAs. And the reason that that's important is because when we do our title search, many times it comes back with HOAs that are no longer in existence, or they've changed management companies, or they've changed, something has changed where the title search, what's on public record, has not been updated yet for whatever reason. So we've got to have that information, because it'll take 10 days for the estoppel letter to come back. And we're going to talk about the estoppel letters. Who pays for that? It's very difficult to describe why a seller pays for an estoppel letter. So I'm going to tell you why. It's the same reason you're asking the HOA what the seller owes to them and what kind of liens might be on the property, or charges or late fees that the HOA is about to do or has done. You're asking for the history. It's the same thing when you order a payoff at the seller's for the seller's mortgage. Why would the buyer pay for that? You know, the seller pays for their own payoff. The seller pays for the payoff or the estoppel from the HOA. What the buyer pays are the transfer fees. Is if when they change ownership and the paperwork that's regarding the HOA, any of the transfer fees or application fees to the HOA, that's what the buyer pays. But the seller pays for the information. And sometimes there's a lot of argument back and forth. And if you want to make it clear, do it on the contract, who's going to pay for it. You know, but typically those are how the charges are divvied up. The other thing, if there's a mobile home on the property, please, we got to know that too. We've got to get the titles to the mobile homes. We've got to have VIN numbers. We've got to have real estate property sticker numbers. They're called RP stickers. We've got to have all of that information because not only are we transferring the property, the real property, from the seller to the buyer, we're also transferring the mobile home from the seller to the buyer. So the titles to the mobile home are important. And if those titles have been retired, we need to know that too so that we don't request a transfer of title when the title is no longer valid when it's been retired. So we need to know all of that up front. Because these are all, just keep in mind, these are all third parties that we're going through. So it takes time to get all of this together in time for your 30-day close. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're dealing with your title company. They're under a lot of time restraints and a lot of people to get these things back. Once we have all of that information, then we go to clearing the title defects or clearing the titles. Okay. There are a lot of things that happen on the title end. Talked about wild deeds. People claim they file quit claim deeds all the time. They do it incorrectly. They cloud the title. We have to go back and we have to fix those issues at closing. We need to know if there's probate. Certain laws have to be followed for probate. We have to have orders of administration. We've got to have orders of the sale of the house. We've got to have all kinds of things approving and ordering the sale of the property. And who's allowed to do it. So that all goes to the probate courts. And those take time. That is not, if you have a property that's in probate, I would recommend 60 days as opposed to 30 days. It'll give you plenty of time to get these things back. Sometimes it can go longer than that if it's not cleared probate. Guardianships and POAs. Let's talk about that. Guardianships are people who have a guardianship. Maybe they have a disabled spouse or one with Alzheimer's, or maybe they have a disabled child or a veteran that they put the house in the name of that person in order to have certain changes made to the home. A lot of people will do that. They'll change the title for VA loans and things like that. If they have a veteran in the house and they need to have special changes made to make it handicap accessible, a lot of people will change the ownership, put the veteran onto the title so he would qualify for things like that. But maybe they're not able to handle their own business, okay? My father was an example of that. My father was a veteran. He had ALS. He was not able to do things himself, but in order to get some of the changes made in the house, that was one of the things that the VA wanted, was his name on the title so he could qualify for them. So guardianships matter. There's a different, just because you're a guardian does not mean that you automatically have a power of attorney for the person. Sometimes you need both. Sometimes just a power of attorney is okay, but we have to know these situations going into it beforehand so that we can tell you what we're going to need from the seller or the buyer.
So sometimes you need power of attorney, and what's the other thing?
Guardianship. Sometimes, yeah, guardianships and power of attorneys are different. Sometimes guardianship is fine. Sometimes a POA is fine, sometimes you need both.
And what's difficult about this is you typically won't know until you get into the title and contract process, because a lot of times the owners go, oh, I had no idea that I needed power of attorney or that I need guardianship. So that's why setting a longer, if you've got a 30-day closing and you realize that you run into this, automatically ask for a 30-day extension. Because if the buyer can't give you another 30 days, then your deal is already dead. So it's better to get that up front and then get all your ducks in a row.
Yes, and then you can always close early. It's great to do a longer close time and we clear everything early and you close early. That's great. But once you have to go to extension after extension after extension, that's when issues.
People get frustrated.
They get frustrated. You blow your deal. IRS liens. IRS liens are, many people feel that IRS liens need to be paid, but I've often had people ask me if we can make them exceptions. No, no. IRS liens supersede even the mortgage. If you have an IRS lien, it's going to get paid before the mortgage gets paid. So you need to know that up in advance. That's a good question to ask your sellers. Are you aware of any IRS liens, any judgments, any other kind of liens that may be on your home? Just ask them up front. They have an IRS lien, they're going to know.
Can they put an IRS lien on a homesteaded property?
Yes.
Okay.
It's every situation is different, but yes, an IRS lien can go on a homesteaded property. It doesn't mean that they're going to foreclose on it, but when that property is sold, the IRS lien will be paid.
Gotcha.
You understand? Yeah, and it accrues interest and everything as it goes, just like anything else. The longer it sits there, the more fees and accruals and interest and penalties. It just grows bigger and bigger.
So do you guys have like a checklist of these things that we should be asking the seller?
Well,
So we can get this information right away and not, wait until the last minute and go, oh, okay.
I can provide one to you. I can go back to the office and make up a checklist and provide it. A lot of times, the realtors will say, well, that's your job. Why are you asking me? Well, yeah, it is, because we're going to find them. The problem is, by the time we find them, might be 10 days after you've given us the contract.
Yeah, it'd be nice to say, hey,
But
seller,
it's enough,
these are the
right.
kinds of things that they're gonna be asking you for, so if you wanna start gathering this information, it'll
Exactly.
make things go so much quicker and
Exactly.
easier for you.
Exactly. And I was joking in the office. Oftentimes we do, but we were joking about, I'd love to give a class on how to have a closing in 10 days. And by having all of this information up front, it could happen, so.
That would be great.
It would be great.
That class.
Good idea.
The more information you collect. And again, you have to understand, when they've worked, your sellers and your buyers have worked with you. They know you. They trust you. They know you. But when I get involved and I make the phone call to a seller and say, hi, Mrs. Seller, I'm Becky Crown. What's your social security number? They're like, what are you talking about? What do you need that for? Who are you? Don't know who you, we're with the title company, and now I have to build a little bit of a trust with these people, which again, takes time before I can slowly gather all the information from your buyers and sellers. So just let them know the title, I don't want you collecting social security numbers ever, no, but let them know up front.
Email them, don't.
Yeah, I don't want you doing that, but let them know, hey, the title company is going to be calling you. These are the kind of things that they're going to want from you. They're going to want these things, so don't be surprised.
So just as a
when they
quick
call.
aside, I have a next steps email, and it talks about all the things that are going to happen. And one of the things I say is, hey, the title company is Crown Title. They may be reaching out to you to get some information. If you get the phone call, don't be surprised. And so you set them up. But in my email, it's, hey, we've got to do inspections. You've got to do escrow. You've got to do this. We need this. And that way they kind of have a good idea of what's actually going to happen. Because the same thing, somebody calls and goes, hey, Greg, I'm Becky and I need your social.
Yeah.
I'm going to need way more information.
Yeah, Yeah, that's kind of not, and especially when you're dealing with elderly people, they are scammed so much, and they don't want to give information. They just don't. They want to rather speak to someone they know and trust. But if you tell them, look, this is the title company, whether it's me or whoever you're dealing with, let them know this is the title company. This is what they're going to be asking you for. This is their name. So don't be surprised when they call and they ask you. It's okay to give it to them. They're going to need it. Many times people will say, it's my homestead, it's not taxable. Why do you need my social? Because we have an escrow account. We're an escrow agent. We have to account for every dollar, every penny that goes in and out of our escrows. And we have to issue 1099s on every property that's sold. Buyer and seller, boom. Because buyers have some costs too. They prorate their taxes. So buyers and sellers, boom. 1099s are issued on the seller, but it's also showing what the buyer paid toward those closing costs. Just because the seller sold their house, they didn't pay all of their property taxes for the year. The buyer had a portion that they paid. So we have to have social security numbers in order to track that and turn it in. What's taxable and not taxable is none of our business. That's between the seller and their accountant, but that's the reason why all we issue 1099s on all of them. And just so y'all know, and if they ask you that question, you can tell them why. So after we have gone through, let's see, we got affidavits. We clear affidavits. We use affidavits often, constantly at closings, because affidavits are just your client is stating under oath that they don't know of any liens, or they've not ever been known by this name, or the judgments that we found do not apply to them. It's the only way that we can continue the closing. If we find John Smith and there's this many judgments on the public record, and there's also 40 million John Smiths in America, this John Smith will sign an affidavit at closing saying that's not me, none of these judgments are against me, and then we can proceed. But lots of affidavits, and that's the reason why when we come up against things, we just have to make sure that everyone knows, or everyone is stating under oath that they don't know of any judgments, liens, anything that we didn't find. There, many times there's stuff out there that haven't been placed on the property yet. We wouldn't find it. It's not in public record yet. So we'll have a sign at the closing. We'll have them sign an affidavit stating that they don't know of anything that's about to happen. Like a bankruptcy or a, big judgment, big lawsuit in the works, that they're not aware of any of that. That's going to attach to the property. Also, when it comes to, I did want to get back to some of the issues that we come up on the title. Divorces, I don't know. I think there's as many divorces as marriages, maybe more now than ever in history. So in Florida, if that home was ever a homestead for a husband and a wife, the wife or the husband or whoever is leaving the home must sign off on that property. Okay? Unless, let's say they're in jail overseas, they don't know where they're at, they've separated. Then I need a copy of a marital settlement agreement stating that the person that is living in the home has been awarded the home and all of the proceeds from that home. Okay. Many times they don't do the quit claim, they don't do that, but we can use a marital settlement statement to supersede that if we can't get the absent spouse to sign off. So if there's a divorce, let them know immediately up front that we will need a copy of their marital settlement agreement. Not just the divorce, but the marital settlement agreement is separate from the final dissolution. Those are two different documents. We need both of them in the situation of a divorce. Many times people will try to hide the fact that they have an ex, or they've been remarried and they got a new spouse in their in their home now. When they took title as a married person, not naming the spouse. And now they have a new spouse. Well, were they married to that spouse, or were they married to the other spouse when they took title? So these are all important things, and they do affect title, and we have to be able to clear them. So we've got to know all of that. That's why continuous marriage affidavits are also used. We want to know you were married to this person from this date forward. We even ask for continuous marriage affidavits on deaths. If you do know if there's a spouse that has passed away or another person that has passed away that was on title, we will need a certified copy of the death certificate. Just to cover our bases, make sure we don't have any issues. And the last, most important, probably the most important thing I'm going to say today is when you sign your contract with your client, ask them for their prior policy. Probably 70 to 85, 90% of all issues on policy can be eliminated by just having the prior policy. Okay, so if you can ask them, do you have your prior owner's policy, your prior title insurance owner's policy
So
with their closing document?
what it translates to is, do you have the paperwork that the title company gave you when you closed on this house originally?
Yes.
Because when you ask for that, they're gonna go,
What's that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
So if you say, do you have the paperwork? They put it in a big file. You probably stuck it in a filing cabinet. Do you have that big, thick file of paperwork that you signed when you bought your house? Oh yeah, I've got that. Awesome. Let me have that.
Mhm.
Because from there, we can go through and pull out the, 5 or 6 documents we need.
Yeah.
Or we can call Becky and go, okay, tell me what it's called again, so I
Yeah.
can flip through these 300 pages to find the 3 that we need.
Yeah, but it is called the title policy, and it's the owner's policy. If we can get, when you sign your contract, if you can get that owner's policy from the seller right then, most of your problems will go away. Just that easy.
Because if there's a survey, the survey's typically in that file of paperwork, your title policy's in that folder. All the things that we need will almost always be right there together in one folder, so.
Yeah.
And most people will hold on to it. They just stick it in a filing cabinet and forget about it, but the minute you ask for it, they're like, oh yeah, that is in the back of, whatever filing cabinet or my safe or whatever.
Exactly. Okay, so once we get all of these things cleared and everything's great, the next step is everybody wants to know, when are we closing? I need a time. So give me a time. What time? All right, be patient. I know nobody wants to hear that. It's so frustrating. Nobody. We don't even want to hear it. That we want to have times on our calendar, but it gets sticky because we're still waiting for the lender's package. The worst thing is for me to schedule you at 9 o'clock in the morning and that lender's package doesn't show up till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now you've got people who are upset. They're upset at you. They're upset at me. They're upset at her. So we will let you know. As soon as that lender package comes through, we're going to let you know. And it's so hard to tell, and we already know what the problems are. The realtors are like, well, these people, they need to know what time because they're moving. I know. And I feel it. I feel it because I want to jump in there and help them move their stuff because I know it's frustrating. So what I would advise you to do is, if you know your closing is going to be on the 15th of the month, tell your buyers and sellers, take the day off. Plan the whole day. Just plan to not be available for anything but closing that whole day. It's better to say, okay, you took the day off. We're not going to close at 9 o'clock today. We're going to close at 12. Lender didn't get the package till 3. Everything's fine. Their plans haven't changed. When their plans change is when you tell them, oh, we close
on your lunch break.
Yeah, we can do this on your lunch. It's only going to take about an hour. It's only going to take about an hour to sign your documents, and we're not going to have. It's not going to be that big of a deal. We'll do the walk-in and walk-through in the morning, and then we'll go to closing. And now these people have put their whole day around this. They're planning their trucks, deliveries, they're doing all this stuff. Just let's solve that problem and say you're closing on the 15th. It's going to be an all-day process. Okay? You won't be in the office in the title company all day, but don't plan anything on the 15th. Don't get the moving truck on the 14th. You know? Enjoy your house on the 15th. Don't be moving on the 15th because you're going to be closing on the 15th. And we don't know when the lender's package is going to come in. You know, we don't know until they send it.
Ideally, it comes in on the 13th or the 14th, but we all know that just doesn't always happen.
So you're saying you don't know the time
Exactly.
that you're going to do closing, you know the date.
I know
Right.
the date, but not the time.
Okay.
So,
So a lot of times you're like, hey, can you get me on the schedule? Now the worst thing is closing at the end of the month. Everybody wants to close the last day of the month, right?
Mhm.
Well, title companies probably doing 9 closings at the end of the month. So they're like, I want to get on the schedule. I want to make sure we can close. Well, the problem is if the lender doesn't get the packet there till 7 o'clock the night before, they come in at 9.
Takes another
Well, they've
hour
got
for
closing
us
at
to do.
9, and closing at 10, and closing at 11, and closing at 12. You've got to have people that are able to do this in between everything else they're doing. So it gets frustrating for
Exactly.
sure, but
Because I know we were told 12 o'clock on this day, and of
Yes.
course, then I'm there with my,
yep,
12 o'clock, then
And
we
it's not
heard,
ready.
go for lunch,
Yes.
because it may not, so we went for lunch.
Yep.
And then while we're at lunch, they called us, come back and such a.
Yeah. It's
So
it could be-
varies.
it can-
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah,
sometimes we have to wait.
and if it's a cash deal, we can set a time. If it's a lender involved, it's more difficult because they've already done their disclosure to them. As long as I get it to you sometime today,
Right.
we're good. You
if I
know,
get it to you by noon, you can close it today.
right? And then when they send the package, it's not just waiting on the package. Now we have to do more work. It's going to take about an hour to prepare the package that they sent. So just because I get a package at 3 o'clock doesn't mean that we're going to be sitting at your closing table at 3:30. I'm sorry. You know, I'm pretty good, but I'm not Wonder Woman. You know, it's like we have to deal, and we have to still send the CD back, make sure nothing has changed from their disclosure. It's still back and forth with the lender once we receive the package. There's still some back and forth. So please, the best service that you can do for your sellers and your buyers is to tell them, don't plan anything that day. You know, just don't. And then I can call you and say, hey, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. We just got your lender's package. Let's get you there at 1 o'clock. Can you get here at 1 o'clock today? That is, if I were the seller or the buyer, it would be better on me than to try to get stuff done before 1 o'clock closing, and then we're not closing till 3 when I could have put that off, and instead of renting a truck, I could have borrowed one from my brother. Yeah, all of these are all real problems. And, you know, there's an old saying from the town that I'm from, it's, you can't prevent a bird from flying over your head, but you can sure prevent it from building a nest in your hair. You know, so if you could tell them, just 15th is the day. Don't plan anything. It's going to be all signing and waiting for phone calls and, you know, and celebrate. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be waiting for phone calls. We're going to be signing, and we're going to be celebrating on the 15th. You're not going to be moving. You're not going to be, I'm just offering it out. Of course, no one's going to listen, because when I get back to the office, I'm going to have, what time can we close tomorrow? So, but just keep that in mind, that we do everything we can to accommodate, but let's not set ourselves up. And you as the realtors, because you guys are the ones that are in the front line, you're going to set yourself up for getting shot in the foot when people are frustrated.
The one thing I say that I have taken away in all my years of real estate is set expectations up front. You know, the expectation is I'm available from this time to this time every day. The expectation is this, the expectation is that. Set your expectation for closing right from the beginning.
Yes.
The expectation is plan on taking that day off. You know, we're not going to know. It depends on the lender. You know, this is a totally fluid process. There is no static, like this happens every time at this point and then this happens. It's all very fluid, and even down to the last minute. We had a closing the end of last month. the title company said, if we don't get the packet by 9:30, we're not closing today. It's just not gonna happen. Came in at 9:11.
Oh my God.
Like literally, we're sitting there watching our watch going, okay, 28 minutes,
Yeah.
24 minutes, 17 minutes. Like, and sometimes it really does come down to that. You're just like, I don't know.
Exactly.
So just, again, if you set the expectation from the beginning, then it's not a panic situation at the end.
Yes.
So,
Yes. So it's like, I know that people want times. I mean, I get that. They do. But just be realistic about it and set it up with them in advance. Just plan on taking the 15th. And hopefully on the 13th or 14th, you'll have a time. Hopefully on the morning of the 15th, you'll have time. But most of the time, after we've done our clearing our title and we've sent it back to the lender, this is us. We're waiting. We're waiting. In the meantime, we're getting 42 phone calls. When are we closing? When are we closing? We have no answer to give you. You know, we're just kind of at the mercy, just like you are. We're at the mercy of everyone else. So just a little heads up, little advice. And people tend to be a little bit happier when we did it on the day we said. When you start narrowing it down to the minute, that's when things get a little bit, that's when they start getting unhappy.
well, the good thing is the packet does come in on the 13th and they call and go, okay, cool, we got all the paperwork, everything's here, we're done. Now let's absolutely set a time. You guys want to close at 9:30? Absolutely,
Exactly.
everything's ready to go.
And we always ask for the packet to come in early, but it doesn't always happen. So yeah, we do ask. And as soon as we get that package, we do set the time. So your home is your single biggest investment you'll ever make. You know, so it doesn't, you know, the title policy doesn't protect things like your homeowner's insurance. We're not talking that. It protects people from placing a claim on your property who are not entitled to that. Now, it doesn't stop it from if it's something that you owe to someone, they're not going to cover that, you know, because you owe it and a lien was placed. What it's going to prevent is someone else is a lien being placed on your property from someone else's issues, from the prior owner's issues. For let's say it's in or let's say you've got heirs. Let's say you've got 4 kids and all 4 kids are on your title, right? And they've gone through the closing and they've got they got the policy and their rights are protected. It was your policy, but they're your heirs and you put 4 kids on it. You're passed away and one of them wants to sell the house out from under the other 3. Can't do that. That's what policies protect against. They protect against that from happening, and they will fight. And the thing is that once you get your title policy, you don't have to pay for attorneys. I mean, they fight it with no cost to you at all. Yeah. So, where if you call your insurance company, they're like, okay, well, we'll fight it, but you know, it's going to cost you this and your deductible, and you're going to need that. Yet there's no deductible. There's none of that garbage. They protect you forever. Abraham Lincoln lost his home, his family home, twice. Twice.
Because other people were putting claims on it, or?
There was the particulars, I'm not sure, but it was acreage that his father owned. Someone put a lien on it and it wasn't cleared and they lost that. And then they went to another property with more acreage. Same thing happened there twice. Abraham Lincoln lost his home because there was no title policies back then. There was no title insurance. But it's because of stuff like that that we have title insurance now.
Good old Abe Lincoln.
Abe Lincoln. Yep.
Piece of history there.
So it's the buyers that pay for the title when they're buying?
The seller pays for the buyer's title and policy. The seller pays for the buyer's title policy. And there's no reason for it other than, I mean, it's negotiable. It's
Any benefits to being there? Or?
it's the seller's way of telling the buyer, I give you this home free of any encumbrances, and this is how I'm going to prove it. of paying for your title policy. It's not the same way in all states. On your Settlement Procedures Act, which are in your settlement statement that I'm fixing to go over, it's going to show as a charge to the buyer and a credit from the seller. Charges the buyer for the buyer's policy. The credit comes from the seller to pay for that policy. But the buyer pays for the lender's policy. See, there's two policies issued at closing. There's owner's policy and there's the lender's policy. So the seller pays for the buyer's owner's policy and the buyer pays for the lender's policy. So it's just a way to keep it all, everybody, gives them an incentive to clear their title and sell their home, and gives the buyer the assurance that everything is good. Now, you can negotiate that in the contract, but it's just a common practice in Florida that that the seller pays for the buyer's policy. Now, if the buyer chooses their title insurance company, it's a whole different story. That's why welcome back. Sorry, I started talking before y'all showed up. When the buyer chooses the title insurance or the title agent, all the costs associated to the owner's policy and the lender's policy are on the buyer. So the buyer chooses, the buyer pays. Seller chooses the title company, the seller pays for the buyer's title policy and all the fees associated with the buyer's title policy. Okay, now in the contract, when you're reading your contract on cash deals, this is important because on cash deals in the contract, it clearly states the buyer pays for the lender's policy and the seller pays for the buyer's policy, right? But if there's no lender, then the buyer doesn't pay. The seller does. So many times, realtors, just like everybody else, get into habits. Everybody's got a loan. This is the way things are divvied out. But on a cash deal, they tend to forget that the buyer does not have a lender involved. So they don't pay for any of the title expenses. The only expense that they pay for is recording the deed and their own, and the prorations and the HOA prorations, things like that. But they don't pay for the title policy.
So if you represent the buyer, it's advantageous to just let the seller pay those closing fees. But if you represent the seller, then it might be worth negotiating that the buyer pays some of those title fees.
I don't think that it would be, if you represent, it's worth negotiating. If it's in a cash deal, it doesn't matter if you're the seller or the buyer, it's worth negotiating that back and forth. But in a loan, the buyer's going to have a lot of fees for the lender, and to tell them that they're going to have more because of the policy that is it's common practice that the seller pays for it. But in a cash deal, everything's negotiable. You could split the fees, like you do on a loan. You can split, you can have the seller pay for the buyer. You can do any of that. Just make sure it's in the contract. But the way that the contract, the default in the contract, you have to read that. The default statement says that the buyer pays for the lender's policy and all the fees associated with it. They don't pay for the owner's policy. Okay, so if there's no lender fee, there's no associated fees for the buyer. So it's negotiable. Talk about it. Get it out in the open, but don't just rely on the default language in the contract and go on with business as usual, because then there's a big uproar when they get our settlement statement and it's got all the fees on the seller's side. Then everybody gets upset. But you have to read your contract. You have to understand what that says. So talking about the settlement statement, we'll go on closing day. Everybody's great. The day before closing, usually it's the day before is when your buyer's going to be contacted. We're going to give them their final numbers. We're going to send out the final closing disclosure to both the buyer and the seller. And when we send out the final closing disclosure to the buyer, we're going to give them the actual dollar amount that they need to wire for their closing fees. So they show up at the office, they've handled their wire, they get those wiring instructions from us, we send it to them incomplete. We will not send wiring instructions to realtors. Please don't ask us. Because
Please don't ask for them.
yes, please don't ask, because it puts you in a situation that you don't need to be in. The wiring instructions are incomplete. We send them straight to the buyer. The buyer has to call us to confirm and to complete the wiring instructions. They have to physically speak to us. And then we tell them, give them wiring instructions, and then we confirm that we've received them. We have to confirm that we have been in receipt of the buyer's funds before anything's funded at the table. Even if we have the lender's money, we have to confirm that the buyer's money's there. So that usually happens about the day before closing. And wiring, you know, what I typically tell the buyers is, I'm going to send you your instructions, call me from the bank, or call me before you go to the bank. I'll give you the rest of the numbers. Take this paper, take your settlement statement to your banker and tell them you need to wire that money, and they will know what to do. And typically, they don't have any problems once you tell them that. But when the problems come up when they go on their computer and they try to wire their money themselves. That's when the problems happen. So anyway, we've got the buyer's money. Now it's time to go to settlement. And we have our settlement statement. If I had a slide, I would show you the settlement statement, but I'm sure that you've all seen this.
Do you have it on your website or anything?
A settlement statement, no. The settlement statement is broken into a buyer's side and a seller's side. Now, fees for your buyer. Of course, it's going to be the cost of the home. It's going to be any of the prorated amounts for your taxes, your HOA, assessments, CDDs, anything like that that's going to be broken between the seller and the buyer. So what gets prorated? Property taxes. I love talking about property taxes. They're very confusing in Florida. Your property tax bill is paid once a year. It's broken into two parts. It's broken into an ad valorem tax, and it's broken into non-ad valorem tax assessments, non-ad valorem assessments, and ad valorem taxes. The ad valorem are your property taxes. The non-ad valorem assessments are what your area of town, what your community charges, whether it's your, you know, I wouldn't even say county because they're not all the same. It depends on what community you live in. Those are things like the lighting, the street lighting, stormwater discharge, you know, things like that, solid waste, things like that. Those are charges that get charged to everybody in your community. It's always the same price because everybody pays the same thing. Other things that are on the assessments are your CDDs. If you live in an HOA community that has a CDD, it's going to be on the assessments, on the non-ad valorem assessments of your property tax bill. So you look at those things, and on the non-ad valorem assessments, those fees are paid in advance. We're in 2019. We're in the year 2019. So when our tax bill comes out, they typically come out in November. And for every month that they're early that you pay them, you get a little bit of a discount all the way up until March when there's no more discounts. Okay. But when you get the bill in November, what you're looking at on the top part, your property taxes, those are the property taxes that are due for the year 2019. They're due in November or later, but you pay that in arrears because it doesn't come out till November. Tax years from January to December. You get the tax bill beginning in November, and you're paying your property taxes for 2019. That's paying in arrears. the assessments, the non-ad valorem assessments, those are paid in advance. So in 2000, on your 2019 property tax bill, that portion, your assessments, you're paying for the year 2020. Okay, so they're paid in advance. So let's say you are closing on a house and we've got to prorate taxes. Well, we prorate them because in November, or in 2019, your seller has lived there for a portion of the time, and now your buyer is going to live there for a portion of the time. So they both have to pay taxes on 2019. So you collect money from the seller and you give it to the buyer because the bill hasn't come out yet. Because in November, when the bill comes out, the buyer is going to pay the whole bill. But the seller owes for the time that they've lived in the house. So we take it from the seller, we give it to the buyer. Okay, we do that at the closing table. And then in November, when the bill comes out, the buyer pays the bill and everybody's happy. They've already received the money from the seller. The problem is with the assessments. Okay, so let's say you sell your property in 2019 or 2000. Let's say it's 2019, and your sellers have already paid their portion of the assessment. They paid that last year in the 2018 bill because they're paid in advance. So those non-ad valorems have already been paid by the seller. So when we prorate that, we're taking money away from the buyer and we're giving that to the seller because that's the buyer's portion of the time that they lived in the house in 2019. We're taking money from them, we're giving it to the seller because the seller has already paid that portion of the tax bill. You're going to have two prorations on your closing statement. It's always going to be two prorations, one in arrears and one in advance. Now, the assessments, this is where it gets tricky. The assessments are not, they don't go from the year January. Their fiscal year is not January to December. The assessment's fiscal year is October to September. Okay, it's just more confusion. So there's going to be one time of the year around October through December, that those assessments will not be paid in advance now. So they're going to also be in arrears just for about a month or two, just because the counties like to mess with us like that. They like to get in our heads. So about a month or two, when those bills come out, that assessment won't be in advance anymore. It's going to be in arrears just for a short time because the fiscal years are different. They figure those two areas out.
The good news is this is all for her to worry about.
Yeah.
And we just need to go, okay, Becky, just tell me what we need to do.
So when you're sitting at the closing table and you see that the sellers have prorations and that you've got taxes, and then you look at the buyer side and you're like, wait a second, why are these two figures the same? Why with the prorations? Because that's often people look at them and they ask them, well, why are they the same? Well, because it's the same amount of money. I'm taking, say, $100 from the seller and I'm giving $100 to the buyer. So it's a charge on this side and it's a credit on that side. That's why they're the same amount. But just so you know, that's how prorations work. CDDs work the same way. CDDs are on the non-ad valorem side of the assessment on the tax bill, right? Paving assessments. Now, who pays a paving assessment? Who do you think takes care of that?
People who
When it comes
enjoy
up.
communities. People who own homes that have paved roads in front of them.
You know what paving assessments are for? They're for the enjoyment of that community. So let's say a paving assessment was placed, but you'll also be on your assessments on your tax bill at a certain point. Sometimes we do closings before those paving assessments hit. Sometimes we do them after they're already in, where you're not seeing them on the tax bill. But we prorate those paving assessments like we would a CDD. And why is that? Because the streets are for the enjoyment of the homeowner. So the seller lived there for a part of the time, the buyer's going to live there for a part of the time. The assessment, that paving assessment, is actually for the benefit of either the buyer or the seller. So they also get prorated unless the lender comes back in a loan situation. If it makes the tax bill too high, the lender will say, no, we need that paving assessment paid. It needs to be paid off. Because without it, it's going to make the buyer's payment too high. They won't qualify. So that's when the lender's going to say, no, we're not paying the paving assessment. We're going to have to do something. So that's when you have to decide who's going to pay it. You know, it's really fairly, it's something that should be negotiated between the realtors, buyer and the seller. Guys, negotiate that on who's going to pay it off. If the buyers want to pay the paving assessment at closing, that's fine. They're allowed to do it. Sellers probably have a little bit more since they're getting their money to pay it off, if the lender chooses. But not all lenders are going to say that. They're only going to say that if it's throwing the buyer out of their approved payment amount.
And it is on the contract. I think it's page 4 or 5, if I remember right. It talks about special assessments, and there are two options. The seller will pay the special assessment in full at closing, or the seller will pay it up to closing and the buyer pays it after.
Which means the prorate.
The proration, right. So if you've got a buyer that you know finances are tight, always just check seller will pay assessments in full at closing. And that tends to be my default. If I'm representing a buyer, that's my default anyway. Because if there are assessments, I want the seller to take care of them at closing, and I don't want my buyer to have to take on additional assessments that they may or may not be aware of. So it is in the contract that it says seller will pay special assessments in full at closing.
Yeah.
It just makes it a bit more predictable for your buyer.
Yeah. So after we do all the prorations, the next fees on your settlement statement is going to add all this. It's going to take what your buyer's going to pay, what your seller's going to pay. You know, and it takes into account the buyer's down payment, also takes into account whatever credits that the seller's going to give the buyer. So you're going to see all of that on the front page of your settlement disclosure. Doesn't matter on the front, on the CD, on a closing disclosure, you'll see it on the second page. On the settlement statement, you're going to see it on the first page. But it'll add up all of the buyer's expenses, subtract what the buyer has paid, which would be the loan amount, their down payment, the seller credits, all of that subtracted from the total that's due from the buyer. And on the seller side, it takes all of the money that they're going to get from the house, subtracts all of their expenses, and on the bottom of the first page, you're going to see what the buyer brings to closing and what the seller takes to their bank. Okay, commissions are shown on the second page. I want to talk about commissions. Title companies, us now we're a little bit different. We do have access to the back office on some things for FLR. We don't see everything you guys do in the back office. If a contract is put in, we see that. That's it. You know, we see that. We see the listing agreement if there's one in there. Other than that, if I don't know what your commissions are, I'm at a loss. I'm not a realtor. I don't have access to MLS. So I can't look at an MLS listing. So when you do your contracts, the number one thing that would help us so much and help you is print out your MLS sheet. I know that Greg recommends doing that anyway. It's a good practice. Print it out and submit it with your contract. Boom, and it's done. Now I know what your total commissions are. I know if there's an MLS fee between the two realtors. I know what's going on there. And I can submit the commissions, you know, early on to the lender. Your CDA is how your commission's going to be split between your broker and yourself. So when the CDA can wait, it's not going to show that breakdown on your settlement statement. It's only going to show the full commissions on the settlement statement. what's going to show where the CDA comes in is when we're writing the checks. So if we got $10,000, that was the commission, your CDA is going to tell me, you know, so-and-so gets 7,000, so-and-so gets 3,000, the broker gets 250. That's what that happens when I write the checks. It's not going to break it down on the settlement statement. A lot of new realtors often wonder why it's not
It'll
showing.
just show 10,000 to Florida Luxury Realty.
Yes.
It'll just show the total commission payable to Florida Luxury Realty.
Exactly.
It won't show your breakdown. So, and honestly, you don't want it to on the
Yeah.
closing statement.
Right. Yeah. It's just going to show the total commissions and who between the brokerages. And then when we write the checks, we write them however the CDA explains. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. Under the law, should I not get a CDA from your broker? Not from you. I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, the CDA comes from your broker to you, but if I don't get a CDA, I must write the check in the full amount to the broker. And then you have to go to the broker and get your money. So please, whatever the broker tells you to do, that you've got to do to get your CDA approved or submit, please do that, because I don't want to be the bad guy at the closing table when I tell you you don't have a check. I have to give it to FLR and you have to wait for them.
And typically, if it goes through Florida Luxury, it's about 7 days before you can get your check. Because they have to process the paperwork, put the check in the bank, wait for the check to clear, and then they can cut your check.
Yes.
So your commission disbursement authorization, your CDA, has to be done at least at a bare minimum 3 days before closing. Business days.
Business.
And typically we say do it 7 days in advance, because you should know 7 days, all your paperwork should be in, everything that you need done should be done 7 days before closing.
Do we count Saturday?
No. So you don't have to have the HUD to get your closing, your CDA. All you have to have is all your required paperwork, your contract, any addenda, your buyer broker agreement, or whatever it is. All that paperwork gets uploaded into the back office. Once all that's in and has gone through compliance, there's a green button that says get your CDA or CDA request. You click that and it sends it to the accounting department to have them take care of it. So typically, like your final closing disclosures and all that, none of that is dependent on you getting your CDA. It's just the required paperwork that we as a broker have to have correct to be able to keep the deal in compliance. All your closing disclosure, your final walkthrough, and the copies of the checks, those all come after closing. So they do still get put into the system, but they don't get done until after.
Do we count Saturday as business day?
Technically not, because we don't have admins in the office for Saturday. They're here Monday through Friday. So for us, that's why.
So, did you have any questions about settlement that come up at the closing table, or anything that you wanted to ask? Anything that's confused you or you've run into at a closing? Did you have questions about? What is this?
That was me. I was just asking.
Oh, okay. No? Okay. And judgments and liens, we know that judgments and liens must be paid in advance, you know, at the closing table. The seller, if they have any judgments or liens against them, that's all taken out into consideration at closing. Judgments and liens are, again, penalties, interest, all of these things, and we have to get those payoffs. Even if it's from a private creditor, we have to order the payoff from them and get those paid out. Other questions that I get a lot are, the home's free and clear, but when I do the search, it comes back that there's a mortgage on it. Typically, that means it's an equity line of credit. So maybe they have a zero balance, but I don't know. I still have to order the payoff, even with a zero balance, and I have to get the proper documentation from the lender for the seller to sign at closing, stating that they're closing that credit line. Okay, so that's a lot of times people have a hard time understanding that. They have to sign, not only paying it off, it has to be signed and closed out. We have a lot of people who don't understand that. We had one come back about a month ago, not our deal, it was on a prior closing, another title company, but on the commitment, it showed that there was a home equity line that hadn't been closed out, and there was charges made on it after the new person bought the home. So whatever title company it was that closed that, they didn't close the equity
So did
line.
the buyer then have to pay that off? Or-
The person who was selling the house now has to pay it. But again, that's a claim on their title policy. So they can go back to the title policy when they bought the house, they can claim the title policy and then they will fight that. But it's not something that we did. It's just something that we see it a lot because people forget that's an important thing to have them close those accounts. And and many times it's not even that a seller's doing anything malicious. It's just a credit card that they've been used to carrying forever
Right.
and don't even think twice about using it. And you know what I'm saying? Is that those things happen. Everything's not malicious. Things just happen. And I'm sure that once the underwriter for that policy contacted those people, I'm sure it would never happen again. So I think I think the sellers will probably pay that off and it'll be good. Other than that, I think the settlement statement is pretty cut and dry. They do that. We try to keep it as simple as possible. We do run into problems when realtors give credits. I do want to talk about that too. So that's going to play into a lot. A lot of times realtors will say, I'm going to give a credit to the buyer, or I'm going to give a credit to the seller, but I want you to take it out of my commission. Okay. And that's fine. You know, we can do that, but we have to show it correctly on the settlement statement. And you have to get approval from your broker to do that because it's got to show on the settlement statement as a check made to who? The broker, right? So the broker has to approve it. Then we have to show the credit, and then we deduct it from the commission on the realtor. It can get you in trouble. If it's not handled correctly, those types of things can get you in trouble. And I just want to get that out there.
So if you guys want to give a credit to your buyer, call one of the brokers. Let's talk through the situation, how we're gonna do it, and make sure that we document it properly, so that we can all kind of be covered with it.
Yeah.
There are a couple of processes and things that we have to go through, so just call one of the brokers and we can talk through it with you and make sure that we do it the right way.
Yes, it's not that you can't do it. Obviously you can do credits. But if you don't do it the right way, it can get you in trouble. So you've got to call your broker, get it approved. They'll tell you how to do it, and then we'll disclose it on the settlement statement correctly. But if it's not disclosed correctly, it can create a lot of problems for a lot of people in a big way, pretty quick, even for $500. It's just sometimes it's not worth it.
It's like we did that with one education where we gave a $500 credit to the seller,
Mhm.
but I was never asked anything about approving anything like my broker. It was just,
You weren't told to approve it with your broker? Who did it?
well, I was on a team, so it should have came out of the team split, except it came out from the whole, the commission itself.
It came out of the whole brokers, so I'm sure that your broker
Rather
probably
than
wasn't
the
happy
team.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's where the documentation, so we can do it. What we have to do is document that the total commission is not reduced by the 500, that the total commission payable to Florida Luxury remains the same, and that $500 comes out of your portion of the split.
Mhm.
So it's just a matter of documenting properly, and we've got a templated letter that we have that says, buyer's agent to contribute $500 from buyer's portion of total commission payable to Florida Luxury Realty, And then as a broker, we can sign it and send it to the title company so that they understand the total commission is not reduced, only your portion of that commission is reduced. Does that make sense? So.
And they can split because like this one was, it was a team, so it should have come out of the team. split.
Correct, so basically in that case,
Yeah.
it would say the $500 was payable out of the team's portion of the commission, not the total commission. But it all has to be properly documented, because ultimately, all of our commissions belong to the broker. The broker then allows you to collect, 80 or 90 or whatever percentage of that commission for doing the work. But ultimately,
Mhm.
every commission, the listing is held by the broker and the commission is held by the broker. It is paid based on your independent contractor agreement. So that's why we have to have letter and proper documentation to show where that contribution is actually coming from. Is it the total commission or is it your portion of the commission? So,
So, and then also want to talk about the difference between broker admin fees and MLS fees. There's a big difference, and a lot of people get a little confused about that. Your broker admin fee goes to your broker. For FLR, I don't know what it is for other brokers. I mean, some of them are very high. FLR is $250 admin fee.
Berkshire Hathaway is $375 and
My
$395.
old one.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say some of them are almost 500.
Yeah, some of them can
They're
get
crazy.
pretty crazy, but FLR is $250 is the admin fee. Now, and I think that's part of the problem why it gets confused. MLS fees are fees that are paid from one realtor to the other realtor. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with your broker. Your broker has an admin fee that they collect no matter what. But sometimes on your MLS listings, you'll see 3% minus 250, which means that 250 that you're collecting from your buyer's agent, that goes to you, not to the broker. The 250 fee to the broker is the admin fee to the broker. The MLS fee goes from one realtor to the other realtor. It doesn't involve the broker. Okay, so when you're asked, a lot of people get it confused. MLS fees are multiple listing service fee. And the broker admin fee is the broker admin fee, administrative fee.
So in essence, what it's saying is if it's 3% minus $295, what they're saying is I'm going to pay you $295 less than 3%.
Mm-hmm.
So that $295 is just something that the listing agent is saying, I'm reducing your commission by $295 less than the 3%, whatever.
Usually because to cover the admin fee.
What they use it for is, we
But
don't
that's
know,
like their
that's their
knowledge,
mindset, yeah, is that we would essentially pay their admin fee. But for the purposes of documentation and compliance, just think of it as they are offering me $295 less than 3%.
Yes.
So what it goes to, there may have no admin
Right.
fee and they're just pocketing an extra $300 and they can do that.
And
So-
I don't know how the MLS service works now, but years ago, each realtor, they would have their MLS fee that they had to pay
They don't have
every
it
year,
anymore.
so they don't have that anymore.
Well, we still
So
have
the
an
MLS
MLS
fee
fee,
went to
but
them.
you used to have to pay for every listing you
Yes.
put into the MLS. There was actually a fee to put your listing in there. So what agents would do is they would charge that $150 or $200 fee that it
Yeah.
cost them to make this property available to other agents.
Mhm.
Well, that went away, but agents are still like, it's a way for me to get a couple $100 extra out of the deal. Awesome. So my rule has always been if it's 3%, I'll put the admin fee in there. If it's anything less than 3%, I'm not gonna charge it. I just don't think that's right. But every agent, you're independent contractors, you can do it however you want, and that's entirely up to you.
So just so you know,
But just keep them straight as to an MLS fee and an admin fee are not the same.
they're not interchangeable, they're not the same, they have nothing to do with each other. The admin fee is always the admin fee to the broker, always. And whether you pay it or not, that's up to you too. Whether you're gonna pay it out of your commission to the broker or you're gonna collect it from your client for the broker, that's up to you. But MLS fees and admin fees are not the same and they're not interchangeable. So a lot of people think they are. Yes.
So I had one where, again, it was on a team. We had the MFR and Flex. The listing agreement had like 2.5 minus, I think, 295. MFR, I think, had 2.5 minus 395, and Flex had 2.5. So it was all three different. It was input, three different. So what would I turn in when it
Whichever
comes?
one worked out best for you.
So there is no like.
So
specific
ultimately, they would have to prove that you saw the listing on MFR or Flex or
Well, as a
Advantage.
seller, it was my listing, right?
Oh, so you
I
were
didn't
saying
input it,
seller?
somebody else input, the
Okay.
team lead did, and it was.
Then in
it came down
essence,
to-
what the buyer is going to say is they should have a printout of what commission was promised based on the source they saw it from, and that's what you would be held to.
And that's why he says to print out the MLS, and that's why I beg you to print
Yep.
out the MLS at the time of contract. Print it out, turn it all in at the same time, so if any changes are made after that, you're
You can
locked
show.
you can show that you had it.
Yep.
That's just very smart.
Yeah, because that happens a lot. Somebody will put it in the MLS for 3%, and then you get a contract and they think they're slick and they change it to 2.5%. Well, if you don't have it printed out, you have absolutely no proof that it was ever advertised at 3%.
Mhm.
And it happens a lot. You get to closing and you're like, this commission is 0.5% short. Oh no, it was advertised at 2.5%. No, it was advertised at 3%. Oh, well, do you have the MLS sheet? Oh, then it was advertised at 2.5%. It's really shady, and I wish that I wish there was accountability for it. But ultimately, unless you have something in writing to show that this is what it was when I executed this contract, there is no recourse for an agent being able to just change it arbitrarily.
Yeah.
They could change it to 1%, and if you can't prove that it was like that before, that's what you get. So yeah, always, 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 always print or just digitally scan it to PDF, whatever. Save your MLS sheet from the time you execute the contract.
So another thing I wanted to talk about too are mobile notary closings and what the difference in a mobile notary closing is as opposed to a standard closing. Mobile notaries are just that, they're notary publics. We use a company for mobile notary they specialize in real estate. So they have been certified to do real estate transactions when they notarize documents. Regular notary publics, they're not necessarily familiar with real estate documents. So if you have someone who's out of state or out of town and they want to bypass the $150 charge for our mobile notary, then you're going to get what you're paying for. So it's possible that they might have a friend who's a notary, but they don't know anything about real estate. They can't help them through any, you know what I mean? It may be again, a nest in your hair. Okay. So just avoid
But I'll
it.
tell you, we had a title company, not Crown, but we had a title company that sent a mobile closer. I had the buyer, and the mobile closer, I don't think had ever seen a real estate closing packet. So luckily I was there and I literally had to explain every single document to my buyer because this notary did not know.
Yeah.
They were just a notary. They were literally just notarizing signatures. They can't explain it. They can't do anything.
Right.
So
I'm having my first one coming up, but I made my seller contact you because she's in Colorado.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to fly, so
So
I spoke to her, told her what she had to do, and so she spoke to you, so that's
Yeah.
all.
yes, that's
That
good.
bothered me.
No,
Yeah.
she's going to go with our company, which I'm
She's
happy
gone,
with,
yeah, I know she's gone
Yes.
with you.
because that way they know how to get all the documents back. We've got a lot of people today, can't you email my documents? I'll just print them out and I'll send them to you. And, we usually have issues with that.
Yeah.
We do, because they don't get it to the drop off in time. Maybe there's not a UPS down the street. They thought it was, but it was a FedEx, and I sent them a UPS label to get it overnight. Maybe they missed a signature. There's all kinds of things that happen when we don't use a qualified signing company. So, I mean, think about that. For $150, you could blow a $250,000 transaction,
Or $1
Yeah.
million
or
transaction.
$1 million transaction, or a $50,000
It
transaction.
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. You're going to blow it for $150 because they thought that they could handle it. When in reality, when we send our mobile notaries, the only thing your customer has to do is say, meet me at such and such, and all they have to do is bring their ID and a pen. That's it.
A blue pen.
Yeah, blue pen. But other than that, that's it. I mean, if they don't use the mobile notary, now they're driving around looking for a notary. Their printer's not working. Their ink is out. They can't print legal size documents. There's a million reasons that things go wrong when they don't use a qualified signing company. So I beg of you, if you have a remote closing or an absent seller or buyer, please try to get them to use a qualified signing company. If they don't want to use the company that we use, that's fine, as long as they're a qualified signing company. But we just offer that as a service. We're familiar with them, and we know that they cover national, that they're all over the country. So that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. Other than that, I think I've touched on everything, unless you've got questions. Are you wanting me to talk about something different? Is there anything?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Everything-
That's good.
Everything good?
Yeah.
Did you get anything out of it, or are you
Oh,
just kind of your head
absolutely.
spinning? That's
Like
the
you guys, I've been
problem.
doing this a long time, and I still pick up stuff every time that there's just stuff I didn't know. That, yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And then there's no questions online then, right? I don't want to ignore anyone.